Okay, Dave, we're ready to get going.
Okay, great. Thanks, Hannah. We have a really good sized group here today, so I want to welcome everybody to this event. I see some old friends in the audience. Thank you all for coming and some new ones. My name is Dave Zapponi. I'm the Executive Director of ECHO, otherwise known as the Educational Council of Homeowners. Thank you for participating in this ECHO community conversation on 2021 HOA Landscape Lessons featuring Justin White. ECHO is a statewide nonprofit association created to support HOA board members and engaged homeowners. Our mission is to foster a better quality of life in community associations through education, advocacy, and connection. The format for today's community conversation will be very casual, with the opportunity to engage in dialogue with the presenter. We ask that you use the chat feature to ask questions or simply raise your hand. Before we move on with the program, please note this community conversation is scheduled for an hour and a half. Attendees will be muted during the conversation. During the presentation, please use the chat feature for technical issues and content-related questions. We will be vetting and answering questions as they come in. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the presentation where attendees can raise their hands and ask questions aloud or submit their questions in the chat feature. We will try to answer all questions, but due to time constraints, we may not be able to, especially this year or this particular event where we have over 200 of you registered for the event. Please always be courteous and respectful of meeting participants. We reserve the right to mute or remove participants at any time and for any reason. This program is copyrighted by ECHO and will be recorded. We do not give permission to others to record the meeting without prior authorization. A copy of the recorded program along with presentation slides will be emailed to registered participants within 7 to 10 days. Again, we will be mailing or emailing to registered participants within 7 to 10 days. Finally, none of what is said during the meeting shall be construed as specific legal advice from either the speaker or ECHO. If you wish specific advice, we encourage you to ask your attorney. At this time, we will begin our program, 2021 HOA Landscape Lessons. Our speaker for today is Justin White. Justin is the CEO of K&D Landscaping, headquartered in Watsonville, California. White is also the current president of the California Landscape Contractors Association, CLCA, local chapter on the Central Coast. He is involved with several nonprofit organizations throughout the community. Since taking over the family business in 2015, White has grown the company from 20 to over 100 employees today. He is focused on raising the bar in the landscape industry and educating the community on proper landscaping principles. You can read Justin's weekly article on Fridays in the Santa Cruz Sentinel titled Landscaping Lessons. Justin, here you go. It's up to you.
All right, David, thank you so much. And thank you everybody for attending today. You don't have to show your video, but it's great to see your smiling faces on here. So please feel free to do so. It's always hard talking directly into a screen. Hi, everybody. Great to see you guys. So you're probably wondering if you've been looking at the promos for this event. Originally, Kendall was supposed to be speaking today, and Kendall is my father. And my mentor and founded K&D. He's the K in K&D. And he was unable to get on here today. He had to run out of town unexpectedly, but everything's still good in his world. And you have me. So I know I'm a little young to be talking about landscape lessons, but my parents' company was founded in 1986. I was born in 89. So I literally was born right into the landscape industry. I grew up on the job site. I can remember probably 4 or 5 years old going to my dad's job site as a kid. And pretty much every summer in school, I'd work for the family business in some capacity or another. So I've really gotten to see all aspects of landscaping. I became a certified arborist in 2013. I achieved many different certification, which I'm not going to sit here and list them all and bore everybody. A lot of numbers and letters in those. But at the end of the day, I look forward to sharing my knowledge with you guys today. Our purpose at K&D, our mission, is really to raise the bar in the landscape industry. And so our focus is basically to share the knowledge that we've acquired to help other landscapers achieve success, and also to help advance the professionalism of our industry that can sometimes be cut short by some of the non-licensed and maybe non-experienced contractors that call themselves landscapers. So hopefully I can do some good today, share some knowledge, and give you guys some key takeaways that you can apply in your HOA boards to advance your goals and your aspirations for your specific HOAs. So Hannah, why don't we jump into the presentation? So I'm going to break it out. This is going to be kind of the table of contents of what we're going to go over today. The first topic we're going to talk about is HOA landscape committees. The second is going to be a plant palette and all the aspects that go into that. The third is going to be talking about irrigation system management, which is a pretty hot topic these days. The fourth, equally hot, is the fire safe landscaping practices, something that with the recent fire year and season that we had in 2020, this is a major focus for pretty much anyone that lives in California, and specifically HOA committee boards. And we'll go ahead and bring it home with risk management and liability issues for you guys to watch out about, especially as it relates to the landscape world. All right, let's jump into the HOA committees here. So an HOA committee, for our definition, is a group of individuals who are typically board members that have decided that they want a special interest in the landscape, and they get together typically outside of the monthly or quarterly board meetings to discuss landscape needs, the quality of the landscape, and help to advance the beautification of the HOA community. Why you need one? Well, there's a lot of reasons, and I think for those who have a landscape committee, you can probably speak to this better than I can. But what we've seen for landscape committees is you help to hold the landscape vendor accountable. So whether it's a landscape maintenance vendor, or you're having an improvement project put in place, or you're having a tree company come in and do tree work, the landscape committee is going to help to develop the invitation to bid. They're going to review those bids, make a recommendation to the board, and then follow up to make sure the work was done properly based on the scope of work and specifications set forth. The other thing is really getting together, ideally on a monthly basis, to just walk the property. You know, what are your community members seeing, and how can we improve the aesthetics and also the overall health of the landscape? There's so many things that go into an HOA and into the community that the board is tasked with. The landscaping can often kind of fall below that. So making sure that your landscape committee is dialed in and you're all in the same page is really important. Another really key aspect of the landscape committee's responsibility is walking the property with your landscape vendor. So many of us, we just kind of set it and forget it from a landscape standpoint. But it's really important that you guys get together with your landscape vendor. You know, ideally you walk with the foreman who's there every week, and hopefully they have a supervisor or account manager they report to that maybe you see on a monthly basis. And you walk with those two individuals on a quarterly, really is probably good. And you just walk the entire property. You walk the four corners, you make sure everything's looking good. You point out issues that you may not normally bring to their attention because it's hard to communicate those. But as you walk, it's a lot easier to identify tree issues or weed issues or other kinds of challenges that you're seeing. It's also a great chance to be that pipeline of information from the board of directors to the landscape vendor. These walks help to relay that information, especially the key areas that are really important to the board that they want to keep looking spectacular. So some of the common landscape issues I see missed when you don't have a landscape committee is really mismanagement of water, which can have a pretty heavy physical impact, a financial impact to your board. Some of the issues are fertilizing. So many of the landscape companies out there have in their scope to fertilize 4 times a year. But how do you know that's happening? Well, your landscape committee, whether it's the committee itself or a person on the committee, can be responsible for making sure that that fertilization is happening, and you guys witness it and make sure that the lawn is green and doesn't have that yellow tinge to it. Making sure the landscape committee is meeting their goals and your landscape vendor is meeting their goals and being held accountable. So many of the landscape companies out there may have a change of people, right? You may have a different foreman from one week to the next, and communication can get lost in the mix. I know from being a landscape contractor that can happen without notice. And so having a landscape committee that knows the systems and processes that your landscape vendor should be doing is really important to hold them accountable. And I think we have one more, risk management. So landscape committee is going to kind of take up the responsibility of risk management as it pertains to the landscape, meaning specifically trees and sidewalks, whether it's a cracked sidewalk or some kind of tripping hazard, or it's possibly a hazardous tree that has potential for failure, or just someone complaining about their views now obstructed because the tree grew. Whenever those situations can arise, the landscape committee can help handle those issues and also just try to keep the HOA as safe as possible from a risk management and liability standpoint. So that's kind of our synopsis as a landscape committee. And Hannah, I think we have a poll ready for the folks here. So here you guys go. We got a poll that's going to be utilizing the poll Zoom feature. So get your mouse ready to vote here. And you should be seeing a poll pop up here shortly.
Yes. Actually, I think because of Dave, where you're logged in, it doesn't look like it's going to let me, but that's okay. We can fix it. So for this one, the question that we asked is, does your HOA have a landscape committee? Let us know in the chat feature if your HOA has a landscape committee. We'd love to see your responses. Again, put that in the chat. Does your HOA have a landscape committee? Yes, no, you don't know.
Awesome. I see a lot of yeses, a few no's out there. Okay. So it's one person. Hey, one person is better than no people.
No, but they're considering to create one.
Yes, sorta. And this is a great opportunity, folks, if you don't have an HOA landscape committee in place. It can be as few as one or two people. Ideally, it's at least two, right? So you have kind of a teamwork, you can share the workload, but it's really easy to create one. It's just as you would create another committee, and it's a great opportunity to put it in your bylaws of, hey, we're committed to having a landscape committee because the landscaping is important to us. So it looks like, I would just say, Hannah, by looking at this, there are, I'd say 70 to 80% have a landscape committee.
That's
right?
exactly what I was going to say. Yes.
Awesome. And then, we have some no, but only 9 units. And even if you have just a few units, maybe you put someone on the board that, their responsibility is, treasurer and landscape manager, just so you have at least one person that knows they're in charge of making sure that landscaping is looking good and they're in touch and kind of the point of contact possibly for your landscape vendor. So great feedback, guys. I appreciate the engagement, and it looks like most of you have a landscape committee in place, and I'm sure you're benefiting from that. And if you have any questions specific to landscape committees, feel free to drop them in the chat box. All right, we're going to talk about a plant palette. We're going to kind of go over this, and I have a quick story actually on this. We took over an HOA in Santa Cruz, and they had pretty heavy turnover from the landscape vendor standpoint, where they've had 4 or 5 different companies over the course of 4 or 5 years. And so when we came in, you could kind of see the different sections. It was about a 85 unit complex. So depending on where you went in the complex, you either felt like you're in Hawaii, or maybe you were in the Sierra Nevada mountains, or maybe you were on the beach in Carmel. And they had these different zones of different plants. And it was really hard to maintain because those plants needed different water, different fertilization, and aesthetically, it just looked much different. So depending if you were on the west end of the complex or the east end of the complex, you would actually feel you were in a completely different community. The only way you could tell is maybe by looking at the roof. They were all the same. So the plants were so dramatically different that it created a major challenge. And it was the HOA board actually came to us and said, hey, we don't like what has happened. We want to get this in control. So we came up with creating a plant palette. And since then, we've encouraged every HOA we work with to develop a plant palette. So a plant palette is a predetermined list of plants that you have identified will live and grow well in your community. Ideally, they're drought tolerant, low maintenance, and there's a uniform theme throughout. So you may not want to mix a ton of tropical plants with a bunch of low drought tolerant native plants because they have different water needs. So deciding on what the theme of your HOA is and what type of direction you want to go into, the plant palette can be created to really help you guys drive the new improvements of your facility. So working with a architect or your landscape vendor is a great way to create this. I think you need one personally because I think it saves cost in the long run. You have less plant failure after a new install, and it's easier to improve the facility. So if you guys looked at the clubhouse and say, hey, we want to revamp the entrance to the clubhouse, it's looking a little old, little tired, you go to the plant palette and you already have a list of plants approved to put into that new install, versus just kind of working with your landscape contractor to decide whatever the plant of the week is that they may have left over from a job they're going to put in there. So the plant palette's really going to help you drive that consistency. And it's also going to help you save money on your maintenance costs, because let me tell you, it's a lot easier to maintain a facility when all the plants are uniform and similar versus trying to create different fertilization applications, watering management tactics for each different type of plant palette. So how to create one, it really depends on the type of vendor that you're currently working with. I really recommend working with a landscape designer or a landscape architect. The CLCA, it's the California Landscape Contractor Association. I really like to go there when I'm looking for a new vendor, whether it's a subcontractor for us or a designer. It's a great place to find those type of individuals. And so you want to probably work either with your landscape vendor or with a designer architect to create that plant palette. And again, here's a perfect chance for your landscape committee to really create some value for your board by working with that designer. And lastly, you want to stick to it. I know this is probably hard because you see that plant in a magazine, or you see the plant on your weekly walks over at your neighbor's place, and you say, hey, I like this type of plant, let's add it. Well, you want to make sure that you're not just going rogue against your plant palette that you guys created, because it's important why that plant palette was created, and it's important to stick to it. And again, the landscape committee is a great team to help make sure that it is stuck to during the new improvements. And let's sweep to the next slide here. All right, a happy plant is a drought tolerant plant. So, for us here in the Bay Area, water is a challenge, and the amount of water is staying about the same. Maybe it's decreasing a little bit, maybe it's increasing a little bit, but one thing's for certain, there's more people every single year, which means there's about the same amount of water, more people using it. So trying to reduce the amount of water that's required to keep your landscape happy is a great way to utilize a plant palette to accomplish that. And creating a drought tolerant plant palette is a great way to help do that. Incorporating the right plants. So you're going to want to really work with that designer to talk about aesthetics and needs of the plants. So you want something that's going to look great and have a theme, but you also want something that's not going to require a ton of maintenance. You don't want something that's going to have to be trimmed every single week. It'd be nice to have something that's a little more drought tolerant and a little more low maintenance. So really putting that into the plant palette can help save you money in the future. Deer resistant planting. We love them, but we also have a challenge with deer in many locations. Some of the more rural areas have more of a challenge than some of the more urban areas. But either way, deer can find its way into the HOA. And I think if you're on the board, if you have a deer problem or not. And if you have a deer problem, finding deer resistant planting is going to be key to, again, it's reducing cost in the future of having to replace plants due to too much grazing from our wonderful wildlife friends there. Fire smart planting is also a good thing to take into consideration. And it's not so much of the plant selection when it comes to fire smart planting, it's the location. So you don't want to put a big woody shrub that's going to be a foot or two away from a building, because that creates a really easy opportunity if you do have a fire for it to go right into the building. So it's not so much of plant selection at that point, but it's plant placement when it comes to fire smart planting. Something to really take into consideration. And continuity throughout the property. I think we can all talk to this. And there's been times where it's either in your community or a community that you've noticed where you just, like I mentioned that story in the beginning, is you don't know where you are. It's like it's a different zone depending on the different part of the property you're walking. So trying to create a nice theme throughout is a really key part of the plant palette. And you may not get it all done in the first year, but over the 4 to 5 years of your improvements, sticking with that plant palette will give you that end result of having continuity throughout the property. Right tree, right place. Most of the questions we've received prior to going live today have been about trees. And I think the trees are a huge challenge, but also they're a very large asset to the community. So making sure that when you are replacing a tree, you're thinking, is this the right tree in the right location? We don't want to put a redwood right under a power line, and we don't want to put an oak tree 5 feet away from a building. But there are Japanese maples that top out at maybe 15 feet that could go in that location. So really working with the landscape committee and working with a designer, architect, or landscape contractor and asking yourself that question, is this the right tree and is this in the right place? One more thing on that note is water use, drainage. So you don't want to put a tree that really likes dry soil in an area that's consistently moist and wet. So that's something we see a lot, and it's easily overlooked in the summer because you're not thinking about drainage when it's dry. But come winter, that place has a tendency to flood, and then that tree may not make it the first year. All right. So irrigation management is a big item on here, and we talk a lot about irrigation management in our company. It's something that I think is overlooked from a maintenance standpoint because, you know, if the grass is green and the shrubs are trimmed, then the landscape contractor is doing a good job, right? Well, what we've found by working with some of the larger communities we maintain is that irrigation can actually save you thousands of dollars a year or cost you thousands of dollars a year. And I know we have folks calling in from all over the Bay Area, but we know that there's certain cities and municipalities and water districts that have extremely high rates and extremely high penalties for going over those allotted rates. So working with your team, your landscape committee, and your vendor to develop a water budget is really important. And also knowing how much are you paying in irrigation water. If you don't know that, that's kind of the first step on managing your irrigation, is figuring how much are you paying in irrigation fees. Many of us don't necessarily have that broken out. We may have just one backflow that everything runs through, and some goes to the building, some goes to the irrigation. So we'll kind of talk a little bit on how to solve that problem if that's your situation. So smart irrigation is here to stay. I know a lot of us, myself included, I've resisted the smart irrigation movement because it's just, why complicate something that it's already kind of complicated? But at this point, smart irrigation is here to stay, and I believe it is our friend. So working with your team to really figure out how you can leverage, you know, Wi-Fi based controllers, weather monitors, and active smart irrigation that can actually adjust your irrigation day to day. We know that in some areas we get a big fog layer that comes in, and maybe a different day during the summer it may be 90 degrees. So depending on how much that weather changes from day to day, the smart irrigation controllers can actually change the amount of water that is applied to your landscape, and therefore saving you money. Because at the end of the day, irrigation is about keeping the plants healthy, but saving you money and saving our resources as well. So municipal water management plan, you guys may see some of this coming through. Some water districts, Santa Cruz City, actually, I just released their long range water forecast. Basically what this requires is the municipal water management plan is that municipal water districts need to develop a long range forecast to help manage their water use. And it talks about how are you going to save water, what penalties are you going to put in place for people who abuse the water use. So what you're going to probably be seeing over the next 3 to 5 years is water districts really giving you a budget to stick to. And once you go over that budget, getting some pretty stiff penalties and fines. You know, like I said, some municipalities have already put this in place. Others are just starting to catch up to that. So really it depends on your location. But at the end of the day, the best thing to do is know what water district you are in, and talk to them and figure out what can we do to get ahead of your water management plan to make sure that you're doing everything as a community to make sure you don't get fined and dinged for overwater use. And resolution 190814-7, basically what it means is all sprinklers are required to have a pressure regulation device. And what that means is when your irrigation system delivers water to a sprinkler, it's going to deliver it at a different PSI based on how much water pressure is coming in from the city. So what this requires is every sprinkler to have a regulating device. So it gives the sprinkler head just enough water to irrigate, but not too much where you get a lot of spray and stuff. So we'll go into a little more detail. I have a slide that kind of explains that in a little more, but it's something to be aware of if you're installing new sprinklers, making sure that you're asking your vendor, does this system have pressure regulating devices? Because it is a requirement as of, I think, October 1st, 2020. Know your shutoff locations. We actually just had an issue a couple months ago where we were called up in the middle of the night and they had a huge leak. Big main line just busted. It ended up being tree roots. And those irrigation lines don't really like to pick the ideal time to break. They love to break in the middle of the night when no one's awake. So luckily someone heard it, noticed it, called us. We were able to send them our Google Map image with the shutoff location. But what we did after that is we got together with their board and we made sure that every board member knew where the shutoff location was for irrigation. Because most of your irrigation vendors will have a 2 to 3 hour callback window or emergency call out window where they can get someone out there to shut it off. But if you guys know where to shut it off in the event of a major leak or a major mainline break where you've got a lot of water gushing out, every minute counts, and it's dollars and it's resources flowing out of that pipe. So if you all know where the shutoff location is, you can communicate with your board, find someone that's awake and active that can shut that down, turn it off, and make sure that you're saving water. One other big element here is when you dispatch an irrigation tech at 3 a.m, you're paying emergency fees, and you're usually going to get hit with some kind of minimum, anywhere from $500 to $800 to get someone out there in the middle of the night. If you call a plumber because you're not sure if it's irrigation or municipal water, should I say domestic water, excuse me, you may get hit with a $1,500 minimum in the middle of the night. So if you can first identify the irrigation shutoff location, shut that off. If it works, then you don't need to call that irrigation tech out till the next morning when you can be billed at a regular rate. Also, if you shut that irrigation off and it doesn't stop the leak, you now have a domestic leak problem, something that's with your building water, and you're going to want to call your plumber out, because when the irrigation guy comes out and it's not irrigation, not only are you getting billed for that time, but now you got to get the plumber out, because most irrigation contractors will not touch your domestic water. So it's so many benefits to this. It's pretty simple, but if you don't know the water shutoff locations, I recommend you get with your board and get with your landscape contractor to identify those and have a file saved where it has some type of Google image and an arrow of where that location is. Annual inspection requests, a lot can happen in a year to your irrigation. So an annual inspection is a great way to make sure that you're staying up with technology that's available and identifying maybe some of those potential leaks that are just getting ready to happen. So a good irrigation tech can inspect the system. They'll go valve by valve. They'll note down any deficiencies on that valve, and they'll present a report to the board saying, valve 3 is good, valve 4 is good, valve 5, we have 3 leaking sprinklers that when they come on, they're just spraying everywhere. So we need to replace those. So most companies will do this, but if you're not getting some kind of annual report from your vendor, it's a great way to know how your landscape's operating from the irrigation standpoint and give you guys some direction to go forward with. And take advantage of rebate programs. City of Scotts Valley actually just emailed us yesterday, and they just upped their rebate program from $1 a square foot to $2 a square foot to remove lawn. So I don't know how many folks are in Scotts Valley, but that's just one example of a municipality that is giving out additional rebates this year to remove high water use areas. So make sure you're checking with your local city. Most of these are actually going to be through your water district. So again, it's a great chance to call up your water district and have a quick conversation about their municipal water management plan, Senate Bill 606, and also ask them about any open rebates that are currently available that could help save you money if you so choose to do an upgrade.
Okay, so we got our second poll here, and so Dave's going to go ahead and launch poll number 2 for all of us. Dave, let me know if you if you're able to see that on your end.
Yes, Hannah, I can see it.
Okay.
And so we're looking at most people don't know where the shutoff valve is. 43% do, 47 to don't. Kind of interesting.
Okay.
A few don't know what a shutoff valve is. So maybe we
Okay.
can do.
We'll give them just a few more seconds, and then Dave, if you want to click share the results, then we'll be able to see how everyone voted.
Okay.
Gary mentioned they have 20 shutoff locations.
Oh, wow. Might need a team for that.
Get to run around a bit.
We dealt with that where you have a bunch of point of connections. It depends on how the developer built the community.
Yeah, I think we're about done here.
Okay.
We have 55% don't know where the shutoff valve is, 43% do, and 2% don't know what a shutoff valve is. And that's shutoff valve is basically where you turn off the water for the whole line of sprinklers, right?
That's correct. Ideally, it's where your entire irrigation system is connected to the water distribution system. So you'll have a main water system, a T, and then usually some type of a backflow device kind of comes up out of the ground. And that's usually the point where you can turn off your entire irrigation system. But many facilities, I think like Gary mentioned, they have 20, and most likely of these backflows where the developer may have built in sections or in phases where you have a lot of different connections. And at that point, you need to know where they are, and you need to know which each section turns off so you can isolate the section that's leaking at that time. So, yeah.
So Justin, is the shutoff valve usually near the meter?
It usually is within 5 feet of the meter. Typically, you have a meter, and then you have your backflow within about 5 feet of that. Some facilities were built before certain codes were in place. So it's really about looking at what your situation is. Hopefully your landscape contractor knows. If they don't know, then you may need to call out some kind of specialist to identify where that location shutoff is. But it's a great thing to put on your list of things to do this week of learning where your shutoff is and knowing where and how to shut that down.
Yes. So the other question is, what about main supply gate versus the irrigation control valves? So there's a rather large difference between those two. So maybe you can touch base on that.
Yeah. So, and I'll back up just real quick, and just some caution here is you really want to make sure that you know what you're shutting off, because if you think you're shutting off the irrigation and you're shutting off the entire water to all the buildings, you're going to have some unhappy residents, right? So, before you go shutting anything off, just a cautionary tale here, make sure you have your irrigation identified and you know what you're shutting off. Otherwise, you can be in some issue and some trouble. So you have basically a main irrigation shutoff, which is typically at your backflow. You can turn that off. That shuts everything down. But if you have a leaky valve, or possibly, let's just say you have a broken sprinkler. So you have your backflow, that goes to a valve. That's always pressurized. This is what's called a main line. And then at the valve turns on and off, right, for maybe 10 minutes every night to irrigate the lawn. And so when that valve turns on, it turns the sprinklers on, it turns off, it turns the sprinklers off. So the backflow and to the valve is always pressurized. It's your main line. And then from the valve to the sprinklers, that's your lateral line. And that's irrigated and pressurized based on when the controller tells that valve to come on and off. So if you have a leaky sprinkler, you may not need to turn the backflow off. You may just need to turn the specific valve off. And that can usually, depending on the valve, be basically a little dial that you can spin down the flow control on that valve and turn the sprinkler zone off until your contractor can get out there to repair that sprinkler. Meanwhile, the other valves can continue to operate as normal because some of us are in very warm areas. And during the summer, if you turn your irrigation system off for a week, you may have some dead plants and some agitated lawn on your hands. So that's kind of the difference between the two types of valves.
Okay, that sounds good. I have a question. That sounds really complicated. Are there specialists that just do irrigation? And, landscapers, they do, obviously the landscape, the plants and whatever, and irrigation, but are there those that you would recommend just use an irrigation specialist?
Well, that's a great question. And so, yes, there are companies that are dedicated to irrigation only, and that's their specialty. And I really recommend you getting to know your landscape contractor, because some landscape companies, such as ourselves, we have an irrigation division. So we have an irrigation team, certified irrigation techs who have passed the Irrigation Association irrigation technician certification. A lot of words, I know. But basically what that means is they know what they're doing and they're dedicated. Some companies are focused on maintenance and keeping your landscape looking good, and they don't have a lot of people on call or in-house that can do this irrigation. So it just depends on your vendor that you're working with. There's no right or wrong way of doing it. But if you're with a company who may not have that expertise in-house, you'll want to definitely contract directly with an irrigation specialist. The best way to do that really is just do a Google search, depending on your area. Type in irrigation company or landscape irrigation company, and start doing some research to try to find the best irrigation vendor for you. But get to know your landscape contractor a little bit, see if they can provide that service. And if they can't, then it's a good time to go out of house and start looking for a specialist. I did see some questions on backflows. I'll just hit that real quick. Typically backflows do need to be tested on an annual basis, and that's usually done by a third-party testing company, not necessarily your landscape company. Those are really easy to find. You can just go backflow testing, search Google, backflow testing near me. A lot of those companies come up. They're around $200 to $300 typically per backflow to test. And a backflow is basically a device that separates the city water and your community's water. So if there's a big leak in the city water and a big line breaks, what can happen is it can create a vacuum effect and actually suck water from your community back into the city system, and that contaminates the city system at that point. So the backflow device, if there is some kind of a vacuum event and the city water actually goes backwards and sucks water out of your facility, the backflow device will stop that. So it's basically exactly what it sounds like. It's a backflow device. So it stops any type of backflow from going into the city water and mixing your community water with the city water, which can contaminate the city water at that point and require a lot of drainage from their system. So backflow devices are extremely important, and they're usually in between your irrigation and the city water, and definitely between your domestic and the city water. If you're not sure if you have a backflow device, talk to your contractor, see if you can locate that. I have seen many instances where smaller HOAs don't have a backflow device, and it's a situation that is a liability that could possibly come up and cost you guys some fines. So check into that if you're not sure. And here, and just the FYI too, just a few more questions. I am talking primarily about irrigation water here. We're focused on landscape and irrigation. I'm not talking too much about the domestic side, although some of the same principles apply. Today, we're focused primarily on the irrigation for the landscape facility. So there's just a few types of irrigation, just as some education here. Looking over on I think it's the left side of your guys' screen here, we kind of see just the spray water. I apologize, these aren't the best pictures, but this is kind of a rotor sprinkler. It's going to send it out, and it's going to be one of these that kind of sweep back and forth. Then you have kind of a spray nozzle, which is on a riser. These kind of just spray all over the place. They're kind of the old school way of doing things. You don't see too many of these anymore. And then you see a tree root system, and what is kind of cut off is the actual bubbler system. This is the best way to water a tree, and you actually put in a perforated pipe with drip bubblers in it. So the water isn't applied to the top of the ground, it's applied to the root system. And the roots can actually suck that water out of the soil where it needs it, rather than try to apply it topically like a sprinkler. So that's the bubblers. And then all the way to the right, we see these little drip tubing with little damp spots. That's the tech line or drip irrigation. That's really one of the most efficient ways to irrigate a shrub area, is where you can actually apply the water directly to the root system of a small plant versus trying to spray it with a sprinkler, where a sprinkler, you have a lot of evaporation before the plant has a chance to soak it up. So those are kind of 4 different types of irrigation application methods that I thought I'd share with you. And here we have the flow sensor. So the flow sensor is gonna sense and measure the amount of flow that's going through your irrigation system. And it's my opinion that every facility, every community should have a flow sensor that you're able to audit on a monthly basis. Because how are you able to manage the irrigation if you can't measure it, right? How do you know if you did all these, you spent $10,000 fixing your entire irrigation system, how do you know if that actually improved it? Well, by putting in a flow sensor, you can measure that water, you get a baseline, you do an improvement, and after that, you're gonna wanna see a reduction in water, right? So the flow sensor is gonna help give you that data and help you measure what you're managing. So the other use of a flow sensor is if you don't have a dedicated backflow for your irrigation system. Let's say you just have one backflow, and then off that you have a bunch of irrigation valves, and then over here you got a bunch of water that goes to the building. And the city sends you one bill and says, this is how much water you used. You have no idea, how much do we use for irrigation? How much do we use for building? Maybe some different types of billing rates in your CC&Rs require you to bill by irrigation use or by building use. Well, the flow sensor can help separate the irrigation from the main water use, the building water use. So that's an important part of your irrigation system. The weather sensor is the weather station, weather sensor, there's different names. This basically is going to help monitor what's going on at your facility, at your community. Talk to the irrigation controller and say, hey, we had fog today. You know, the temperature didn't get out of the 60s, so we don't need water tonight. Or we had a crazy hot day, it was 98 degrees, and we need to double the amount of water tonight because everything's really thirsty. So those weather stations can help communicate to your controller and explain how much water should be going into your landscape. One of the best things we use weather stations for is simply just to not water during a rain. You don't want to be that HOA that has their sprinklers going when it's raining. And we've all been guilty of it once or twice, but with the new technology out there, there's really no excuse. So the weather station and just a simple rain monitor will help make sure that you are not those people, because usually you'll get a call from someone if your sprinklers are going during the rain event. I know we've all been there. Real quick, I got a question on the drip tubing. Should it be covered with mulch or soil? Yes, absolutely. It should be covered by a few inches of soil and mulch ideally on top of that, because the UV rays from the sun will damage it. Plus, it just doesn't look too good when you can see it. So the proper installation is about 2 inches below soil, then about 3 inches of mulch over that. So you get about 4 to 5 inches of cover on that drip tubing. All right, cool. We can go to the next slide there. And sorry if I'm not answering all the questions. There's a lot coming in, folks, but keep them coming. We'll try to get to all these at the end of the presentation. I appreciate the engagement here. So here we have 2 really cool pieces of technology that we use on a daily basis. The Hunter HydroWise is a Wi-Fi based controller. So your irrigation team can actually monitor and adjust the irrigation from anywhere in the world, as long as it's connected to Wi-Fi. So it's really a great system, and you guys can monitor the amount of water that's being used and how that program is changing from day to day. So we really recommend getting a controller that is Wi-Fi based, simply for the fact of being able to turn it off and on, like I mentioned, during some of those rain events. And I think we can try to hopefully make some of these slides available to you all. I know that's been a question that came up a few times. The Hunter controller, yeah, right here we have this is just a controller. So if you're on site, some of our facilities are quite large. So you may have your controller on the east end of your property, and you may try to look at irrigation on the west side of your property, and being able to turn the valve number 17 or what have you on when you're at valve 17 versus having to run back to the controller and then run back to see if it's working it's a great tool to save time. And even if maybe your landscape contractor doesn't have something like this, actually investing in this as an HOA could be a good way to save billable hours, because most of the time when your irrigation tech is out there doing investigation, it's a billable event. So if you have these remote controls at your controller and all ready to go, it can actually save you guys money and make your vendors more efficient out there. So it's a good thing to know about that these are available. So here's a good example. We mentioned the pressure regulating sprinklers before. What you have here, non-pressure regulated, you see a lot of mist, a lot of just spray coming out because it has too much pressure to that irrigation nozzle. And a lot of that spray ends up just going up into the air, being evaporated. Usually about 30 to 40% of the water does not actually hit the ground. That does hit the ground. Very little of it soaks in before the sun takes it up. What you see over here is the pressure regulated MP rotator sprinklers. They put the water out in large droplets so the water can hit the ground, soak in, and you get much better efficiency on the MP rotator pressure regulated sprinkler than you do on your old fashioned non-pressure regulated spray heads. And like I mentioned, it's a 30 to 40% savings on water. What you have to remember is if you put these MP rotators in, you want to take down the amount of minutes that's on your controller. Otherwise, you're not going to save any water. So it's important that when you do change this, you change the cultural practice around the programming of the controller as well. Non-check valve. So when a irrigation valve, right, we mentioned you got backflow, you got an irrigation valve, then you have your sprinkler system. When that irrigation valve turns on, it pressurizes and all the sprinklers come on. When it turns off, it stops the pressurization, but the lateral lines are still filled with water, right? And what happens is the lowest sprinkler in the zone will just slowly seep out. So if you have a low spot in one of your lawns, it's always wet, that's what's happening. The leftover water in the lateral lines is just seeping out of that lowest sprinkler. And it's always wet. You never know, why is it always wet? Maybe we have a leak. Usually it's what's called low head drainage. So there's actually a check valve in sprinklers these days. When you buy the check valve equipped sprinklers, that is a spring. You see a spring that pushes down on the bottom of the inlet. So when that water is sitting in the pipe, it doesn't have enough pressure to push that spring and leak out. It actually, the sprinklers actually self-close when the pressure drops below a certain level, and you eliminate that low head drainage. So it's really it's a cheap way to solve a really difficult problem, and just it's one of those things when you're having a new landscaper or your current landscaper put in sprinklers, ask them, hey, do these sprinklers have check valves? Because most of the time they don't, for the simple fact that a check valve sprinkler is about $8. A non-check valve sprinkler is about $5. And at the end of the day, everyone's always trying to save money, so they go with the cheaper sprinkler, not really thinking that it could lead to long-term effects in your lawn and in your irrigation system. All right, just checking our time here while we roll into our fire zones. Hannah, how are we doing on time?
We've got about 12 more minutes till we get to Q&A, so probably have to move through this last half fairly quickly.
Awesome. I had figured as much. So, all right, fire. Fire safety in the landscape is something that is a hot topic, and I do feel that this is really an hour and a half presentation just on fire. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it. I will highly recommend that your team and your HOA board goes out and educates your team on fire safety now, because if you wait until March, you wait until April or May when the fire hazard starts to creep up, you may be too late, because the contractors that you call say, yeah, I can come out, but it's going to be 2 or 3 months. And I can say right now, we have about a 2-month backlog with our fire prevention team, and we have about 8 fire prevention crews right now working full-time doing mowing, tree removal, and fire prevention type of work, and we're booked out. So get ahead of this, make sure you're educating yourself now, and you're calling vendors now to make sure that your community is safe. So the first thing is know your zones. That's how we'll go into some detail on the zones in a minute, but knowing where those zones are and how to manage them proper management of your landscape and natural areas. So we do a good job usually of managing our landscape. It's that outer bank area. It's that riparian area that borders so many of our communities that we took on as a liability when the developer built it. We have this 50-acre parcel that now we are in charge of mowing and keeping clean. So make sure you know what's your responsibility versus maybe your neighbor's responsibility, and you're working with the fire marshal to keep that in compliant. Fire-resistant plants. Look, there's really no such thing as fire-resistant plants when it comes to a fire. Anything's going to burn. The main thing is making sure your plants are moist and watered adequately, and they're not really dry and brittle. But there is better fire-safe plants. There's just not fire-resistant plants. So stuff like agave and succulents that have a lot of moisture in them are going to be better retarding fire versus something that may be a Arctostaphylos or rosemary that hasn't been watered in a couple of years. That's really brittle, and you can think about how much easier that's going to go up in flames versus maybe a succulent. And creating defensible space. This is really your best bet against fire, is creating a space where the firefighters can get in and they can fight the fire. They can create this defensible space that gives you, 20, 30, ideally 100 feet from all buildings where they can get in and they can make a stand for your community in the worst case scenario. And help first responders find you. Simply don't have all your addresses hidden and plants growing all over, making sure that your community is well signed, well marked, and the address locations are easily accessible. Should not only you have a wildfire emergency, but you have a specific fire emergency where you've called 911, you've given them an address, make sure they can find that address. So that's just kind of an extra little tidbit there. Here's the zones. And again, this is easily findable on Google. You just search, fire safety landscape zones. 0 to 5, you basically want 0 plants. 5 to 30 feet, you can have lean and green, but you don't want a ton of shrubbery in the 5 to 30 feet or tall trees and such. You want stuff that's low and green. And then the 30 to 100 foot mark, you want to really reduce the fuel. So you want to clean up those dead limbs. You want to clean up those dead leaves. And most of our HOAs are pretty well maintained. But again, when we get into that riparian areas, those natural areas that border so many of our communities, we want to make sure that we're cleaning the underbrush in there, because that's the fuel that when an ember comes in is going to start the fire. If you have a nice clean underbrush, clean under canopy, you're going to have a much better chance at reducing the fuel and reducing the fire chances of your community. Okay, quick poll here.
Yes, we'll go through this one pretty quickly. Dave, if you can go ahead and launch poll number 3, we'll get their responses quickly. And the question that we're asking is, has your HOA made any fire prevention upgrades to your community's landscape?
All right. So, this is specifically, in the last, last 6 to 12 months with some of the recent fire activity we've had. Have you guys made any improvements? Have you hired or done anything different maybe than you would have normally done over the last 6 months? All right, we're starting to get some activity here. Thank you, everybody.
All right, Dave, we can probably end that poll and go ahead and quickly share the results.
Okay. All right, guys. So it looks like about 1/3 of everyone has done some improvements. About half have not, and about 20% aren't sure. So it's right now is a great time to do a fire safety assessment on your property. And I would, again, start with your current contractor, reach out. And if they're not able to provide that, then start looking for additional resources. The ECHO membership of landscape contractors is a great place to look for these type of individuals. And then going on more broadly from there, the CLCA is another great place. And then from there, you can always just, start calling people off Google. But I think it is a great time to look at your fire safe and make sure that your community is ready for this wildfire season.
So Justin, let me add a comment on that, because I think it's a great great that you're bringing this up. There are community-based resources that you can contact. You can contact your local fire department. They probably will put you in the right direction with somebody that does this. There are also national associations that will help with the selection of plants, and also give you some advice, some basic advice on what to do. Many of these services are free. And so I'd recommend that you ask around a little bit. We had up in the North Bay resource panel, we had a couple of conversations and people come in that actually provided these services to the community. So there's a lot of opportunity for you to get some answers before you're ready to commit to a project.
Yeah, that's great. I will totally echo the idea of reaching out to your local fire safety district, and they will always help you. And they love to see that type of engagement from the community. So there's specific people ready to help you in that area. Here's just some maintenance tips and just some easy ways to help keep your landscaping in control. So trim old, dying, or woody plants. Make sure those are cleaned up before fire season. Remove leaf litter and debris within and around plants. This is something that is kind of just, it's good maintenance, but also some people get a little, short on time, and sometimes leaf litter can build up under plants. So it's good to make sure that it's nice, clean. You pull that out and get rid of it. Keep trees limbed up and separated according to the zone. So again, if you have certain trees that like to grow really close to the ground, it's good to keep ideally a 6 feet or more of coverage from the ground to the first leaf. So try to do that as much as possible. Some plants and trees, their growth habits don't always allow for that. But again, it's looking at where is this tree located in connection with your house and trying to reduce that ladder effect as much as possible. And vines, we've all seen it, right? The vines, whether it's a planted vine or it's a volunteer vine that just decided to grow there. Vines love to grow up trees, fences, buildings, telephone poles. So that's a really good opportunity for fire to just climb right up that vine. So trying to reduce vines growing on anything besides maybe an arbor or pergola is really ideal. You don't really want vines up against your building. Not only is it a fire issue, it's also a rodent and maintenance issue as well. And here's some additional tree maintenance. Specifically, keep trees 15 feet from the sides of your houses and 10 feet above the roof. This goes back to the tree conversation, making sure they're not touching the building and trying to get that separation. Keep limbs trimmed up 8 feet from the ground. So, 8 feet's ideal, even more if possible. So really trying to reduce that ladder effect where the fire comes in and can climb right up a tree, and then it can jump to the house if your tree's touching the house. All right, remove dry, dead, and diseased branches. So this is kind of a no-brainer. It should be done anyway, but keep an eye out for those dead and diseased branches, getting those removed. And then here's just some additional tips. Signs of rot. You'll see fungus growing or mistletoe. That's kind of a notification that your tree is dying or that branch is dying. Bare branches or leaves at the tips. 50% or more, the tree is dead or missing limbs. When you have a tree that's declining in health, it becomes more and more of a hazard every day. So identifying, can you save the tree? If not, all right, let's get a replacement plan in place. Don't just leave dead trees hanging around the property. Like I mentioned before, there's really no such thing as fire-resistant plants. You can see right here, the cactus, which you would imagine would really resist a fire. It's pretty much toast. I don't think that one's going to come back. So all plants can burn. Fire-safe landscaping really is all about pruning, irrigation, and cleanup, and really trying to select low-growing, higher moisture content plants is best. And I know I'm kind of starting to speed up, guys. I apologize. I have a tendency to talk too much at the beginning and we got to rush through the end. So we will make these slides available for everybody that you guys can really take your time and read through this, okay? So I just wanted to note that. Great example, what not to do, right? This is where you don't have defensible space and your fire team is going to have a really hard time protecting your facilities when you have shrubbery growing this close to your building. Irrigation management is key for fire prevention. So keep your landscaping green and healthy. Don't let it get really dry and woody. And it's really selecting that irrigation monitoring to make sure you achieve that. Again, all plants can burn. However, maintaining a high moisture content in plants will help make them more difficult to ignite. And that's really what we're trying to do when we're talking about irrigation management, is keeping your plants healthy and green. Proper irrigation is critical. So plant maintenance and fire defense. So, keeping your irrigation on and not just turning it off midsummer and letting everything go really dry is an important part of making sure you have a fire defensible landscape. And choosing the right irrigation. We mentioned before, do you need surface drip versus deep root bubblers? Do you need overhead sprinklers or surface drip? So identifying what's best for your specific landscape is going to be key to making sure you're giving them the right amount of water without wasting any. All right, we'll wrap it up with number 5, which is risk management and liability issues to watch for. This is kind of speaking from experience. I'll share some pictures of some properties that we've dealt with. Drainage issues and slip hazards. Anytime you have water that's just sitting and seeping across a walkway is a really it's an opportunity for a slip hazard. And if it's a drainage issue that's been brought to the attention of the board, you may have a bit of a liability issue on your hands. So this is where the landscape committee comes in really handy to identify these issues and try to remedy them as best possible. Erosion issues really is just reducing that unexpected cost that can come in out of nowhere and reducing catastrophes. So when you ignore a drainage problem that's small, a lot of times that drainage problem will turn into an erosion problem. We've seen some pretty expensive erosion problems, especially over the last 3 years with some of these major storms that we've had. Raised concrete and trip hazards. We all have this problem. It comes all the time, whether it's tree roots, it's expanding soil, or it's other type of challenges that are heaving up our concrete and creating that trip hazard. I'll share some pictures of some specific scenarios. And dead, dying, and hazardous trees. Again, this is a situation. We just had that big windstorm not too long ago. We had a lot of tree failure. So making sure that you're doing as much as possible to mitigate the possibility of a failure is all you can really do as an HOA board. But when you know there's a hazard and you're not taking care of it, that's where the liability starts to creep up. So making sure that you're taking care of as much as you can, you're identifying those issues and you're acting on those issues versus, kind of rolling the dice and saying, well, hopefully this tree doesn't fall. So getting those inspected annually is really a good call. And I would recommend doing that sometime between September and October, is having a full inspection, really a tree hazardous inspection by a certified arborist is ideal. Here's the beginning of an erosion issue. You can see this pipe's just piped out to bare dirt. And what's going to happen over time is that's going to start to cave in. During a big storm, you may have a major failure, and you see this beautiful, what looks to be some type of a glass fence that if it is eroded too much, it could fail, and you have electricity and conduit running on there, and you probably have concrete above that. So you could have a pretty expensive failure. And the simple fix here is either pipe it all the way down to the bottom of the hill, or just put some rocks in there that the water can run down so it doesn't erode the soil. And this is a picture of a situation we had a couple of years ago where we did have a similar situation as the one before, where the pipe had just gotten piped out, but it was covered by berry bushes. And what happened was one day, the whole hillside just gave way and it went all the way down into the road, and it created a huge emergency situation that was a very expensive fix because the city had to get involved due to the impact on the road below. So it really comes down to installing the drainage facility correctly so you can avoid this type of an issue. Here's some tree root damage issues. You can see these really large surface roots penetrating into the concrete and lifting the concrete up. These trees are, this tree is probably only about 10, 15 years old. So it's really just getting started on its concrete devastation. So it's important that you take care of these situations. This is an example of the wrong tree in the wrong place. You don't want to put a tree like this in such a small planting area. Here's another situation of a tree Wrong tree, wrong place. You have a tree that is really large and is going to continue to grow right next to a city concrete sidewalk. And it might make for a great ramp for skateboarders, but for your community, it's not something that you want to have. Especially, this looks to be an ADA path of travel. You can see that ramp right there, the ADA ramp to the building entrance. That definitely is not ADA compliant. Again, another situation for a possible lawsuit that you guys want to avoid. Here's a really big tripping hazard. And you can see just quickly glancing at it, it's hard to pick up the difference in the levels of the concrete. But that's just an opportunity for someone to trip their toe, fall over, possibly hurt themselves. So that's a situation where you're going to want to get in there and grind that concrete down. And ideally, you either remove the tree or you do some root pruning, like I mentioned at the beginning. And this is some proactive root barrier management systems that could avoid everything we just looked at. So even though you may have some small planting areas where you want to put a tree in, you can actually install root barrier systems that block the roots from going laterally and actually direct them down into the ground. So they go below everything and they grow down into the soil where they're not going to impact the concrete or the pavers or possibly the fence or building or structure. So root barrier systems, really the rule of thumb here is if you're planting a tree, any tree within 5 feet of a building, a fence, or any other kind of a foundation or concrete, you're going to want to put a root barrier in. So 5 feet is really the rule of thumb there and should be put in for any tree within hardscape or any other structure. So if you haven't taken any notes, here's a great time to take some notes and write down some of what I think are the key takeaways. Make sure your HOA has a landscape committee and update your CC&Rs to reflect that or your board policies. Develop a plant palette that meets your microclimate and stick to it. Hey, we all know the difference between the hills and the coastal zones. You can have completely different microclimates. You can't manage what you don't measure. Make sure you're tracking your irrigation use and making smart decisions to reduce water as much as possible. Fire safe landscaping is more than just plant selection. Preventative maintenance is key to protecting your community. The biggest one here is create defensible space. If there's one thing you can do, it's do that. Give the firefighters a chance to protect your facilities. And risk management is the responsibility of every HOA board member. Keep an eye out during the day and report issues to your landscape committee or board president. We can never be too cautious on these things. So bringing up those challenges and issues and liability concerns is a great way to add value to your HOA. All right.
All right, we're going to end here on a slide. Dave, go ahead and if you can launch poll number 4, and we will I'm just going to skip on to the next slide, which is going to be Q&A. We'll start with asking you a question though. And again, thank you, Justin, for your time. And we're going to move on to Q&A. So the question that should be launching on your screen for the poll is, out of the 5 topics discussed today, what is one that will be a priority at your next board meeting? Justin, you covered a lot of things today. Very nice. Good job.
I know, folks. I know sometimes it could feel like you're drinking from a fire hose today. So I kind of wanted to give you guys a chance to identify what area is most important to you that you're going to take away from today's discussion.
And again, this whole presentation today is recorded and the recording will be made available to everyone that registered, along with a copy of the slides. So if you feel like you maybe want to go back and revisit an area, you'll be able to do that.
And there's some great questions in the chat box, and there's also some great advice from some of you folks as well, tuning in here, offering up advice and suggestions. I love the engagement of all of us kind of having this conversation around improving everything. All right, fantastic. So the results are in, and it looks like the majority of us on here are going to focus on irrigation system management, which I think is fantastic. And I do think it's probably the biggest area of opportunity to save money for your HOA boards in the future. You'll be surprised when you start digging in and finding out just how much you're paying for irrigation water on a monthly basis. It's pretty staggering.
Well, I'll go ahead and start us off here with a question that I see in the chat. It's about the 140 mark from Christine. She says, we have well water, but it is high in iron. Is that detrimental to plants and trees and lawns?
It can be, yeah, definitely. High iron could create some buildup, not only on your water delivery devices, such as the sprinklers and drip emitters that can create actually clogging, but the high iron can mess up the pH in the soil, creating a non-ideal environment for the plants, which require more water than they normally need. So iron is important and it's needed, but too much of it can really throw the pH off. So what the best thing to do is actually to have your water tested by some type of water testing lab and find out just how much iron is in that water. And then you can actually develop a fertilization routine that helps to offset that iron by adding different other fertilizers, such as ferrous sulfate, I think helps balance out iron. Also, sometimes adding sulfur to the fertilization application can help balance out that iron. So it really depends on how much iron, just how much iron is in there, and take it to a professional lab that tests water, specifically usually for maybe agricultural use, and they can give you some advice on that.
I've got another one here just below that question. Do you have a price range for the rain monitor or weather station?
Yeah, they can be as inexpensive as $45, $50 for just a simple rain monitor that will shut off like a rain click. It shuts it off when it gets too much water, turns it back on when it dries out, all the way up to $1,000 and up for a very extensive weather monitoring station that can really tell everything from humidity to air temperature to also air pressure and so on. So there's a big range from rain sensor all the way up to a weather sensor that will actually adjust the irrigation versus just turning it on and off. So there's a big range there.
Okay. And are there data services that share localized weather info in a format usable by smart irrigation systems?
Yep. Many of the irrigation manufacturers, such as the Hunter controller I showed earlier, the Hunter HC HydroWise controller, they actually are tied in to all the local weather stations. And so whether it's an airport or it's a municipality weather station, you can pick what are you closest to, and it'll sync up with the data from that weather station, and it will adjust your controller based on the data it receives from that weather station. Some others have different forms of accomplishing that, but I know the Hunter HydroWise has a pretty wide network of weather monitoring stations.
Okay. How would an HOA or a homeowner find out if their city is in a fire danger area?
So I think the best way, pretty much every county has a fire prevention board, and that's part of your county government, basically. So I would start there. I would start with trying to figure out, do you have a fire prevention team assigned to your county, and reach out to them. And typically those teams will work in connection with the cities. So it just really depends on your jurisdiction and the city or county that you're in. But I would start with looking, does our county have a fire prevention board? Reach out to them, and they may direct you more specifically to a city fire prevention team, which you can then go into more detail around your specific facility.
And you mentioned the acronym CLCA. Can you remind us again what that stands for?
Yeah, the CLCA is the California Landscape Contractors Association. And it's really the only statewide C27, which is the landscape contractor license code, nonprofit that is basically a conglomerate of landscape contractors.
Okay. And we've got one here. Rich asked, what do we do where a utilities coffin is the tripping hazard?
Yeah, so we're thinking probably a utility box, right?
Right, that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, so we've all seen those utility boxes that are maybe in a sidewalk, where the sidewalk and the utility box haven't quite agreed on how they're going to settle in. So maybe the sidewalk has sunk in a little bit over time and the utility box has not moved. And so maybe it's an inch or two higher. The best thing is to contact the appropriate company who's in charge of that utility box. Is it PG&E? Is it water, such as your city water? Or is it a locally owned, an HOA owned utility box, at which point you're going to have to maybe deal with that on your own. But first is figuring out who owns that box. And if there's a cable company or something attached to it, I would start there and work your way on trying to get that leveled. But I will say, if it's PG&E or a cable company, you're going to have to be patient because they can take some time when it comes to those challenges. But that's your best opportunity there, is try to contact who owns that box.
And you were talking about the root barriers. Is there a suggested size, or how do you go about finding what size is best for the area that you need it in?
Yeah, great question. So the root barriers basically come in different depths of either 18 inches or 24 inches deep. And it's going to depend on the type of tree you're installing. We only put in 24-inch root barriers because why not, right? Why not add that extra 6 inches of protection? So we always put 24-inch root barriers in. And what you're going to want to do is, again, you're going to want to, if it's anywhere within 5 feet of any kind of utility structure, concrete, building, fence, you're going to want to put that root barrier along that building or along that concrete, not necessarily up against a tree, but actually along the sidewalk. And then you're going to want to extend it 5 feet in each direction of the tree. All right, so you're going to have 10 feet total. Let's just say you have a linear sidewalk. You plant a tree 4 feet away. You're going to want about 10 feet of root barrier along that sidewalk. So I hope that answers the question pretty well. And again, 18 or 24-inch depth, I always go for the 24-inch depth because why not just dig another 6 inches and make sure you're well protected.
And does that root barrier, does that count for any guidelines for roots to travel down? Is that the same thing?
Yes,
Would that be different?
Oh, that's basically what it's going to do. Is when roots hit that, roots are really funny. They're very strong, but when they hit a little bit of plastic, they will just go immediately start growing down until they get past that root barrier, and then they'll start growing out again. So if you can think, they come in, they grow down, and then they grow under it. And by the time they're 24 inches deep, they're really not going to cause any damage most of the time. As far as existing trees, I know a lot of us are wondering, oh, well, we have this existing tree. Sometimes, depending on the tree and the size and the lifetime of the tree, where it is in its lifespan, you can do what's called root pruning, where you go in and you can trim the roots and you can install a root barrier system that will prevent the tree from continuing its growth into your concrete or your building or your fence or what have you. But again, I highly recommend anytime you have some of these situations with existing trees is you get a licensed arborist on site. They're usually $150 an hour, but that hour you can learn a lot, and it's really, really valuable information because we all know how expensive replacing a mature tree can be between the removal and the replacement.
And Justin, we had Shirley here ask, where is K&D located?
We are located in Watsonville, California, and we currently offer maintenance services from Los Gatos over to Morgan Hill, down to kind of like King City area, and then all the way into Carmel Valley and Pebble Beach. So we don't do too much maintenance over in the San Jose area or the Bay Area, but we're more than happy to help do consultation, or if you need help getting in touch with a good landscaper, we know a lot of them. We can help give you a referral for anyone that's outside of our area.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's see, we've got another question here. Let's see who asked this question. This is JJ. So this is at 2:11 in case you want to check on your chat. What meter or flow sensor do you recommend that will not only measure usage, but also leakage and can be monitored wirelessly and remotely?
Yeah, okay, great. So flow sensor works in connection with the master valve, which works in connection with the controller. All right, so you have these three components. So your controller says, all right, valve number 15, we're going to turn you on. And it sends a message to the flow sensor in the master valve that says, okay, valve 15 is going to operate at 15 gallons per minute. So the flow sensor measures and says, yep, 15 gallons a minute. All right. And there's what's called a master valve, which is right after the flow sensor, which is basically the emergency shutoff. And it's operated electronically. So that flow sensor is measuring, all is good. Well, all of a sudden the controller says, okay, it's enough, turn off. Well, that valve decides it doesn't want to turn off. All right, there's a little rock stuck in it. We've all had this problem, right? And for an hour, this valve is running, and someone has to go and turn it off. Well, with a controller, a flow sensor, and a master valve, what will happen is once the controller says, all right, valve 15, turn off, the flow sensor says, wait, hold on, we still have 15 gallons per minute running. This is not right because the controller said it's turned off. So what it does is it tells the master valve, we've got a problem, turn off. And the master valve turns off and stops the flow. And an alert is sent to that controller saying we have an error, valve 15 is stuck on. So they work in connection to make sure that no water is flowing through that flow sensor that's not supposed to be flowing. The other issue is middle of the night, big mainline breaks, boom, all of a sudden the flow sensor is registering 60 gallons per minute. Well, it knows that the controller is not supposed to be operating right now, so it sends a message to the master valve saying, turn the water off. It turns it off, sends an error message to the controller, which can then be diagnosed by your irrigation contractor, and the leak can be repaired and the error message can be eliminated. Wi-Fi based controllers are really great for this because that error message doesn't just stop at the controller. It goes all the way to the typically the cell phone of your landscape contractor with an alert message saying, hey, community number 34 has an error message and it looks like they have a mainline leak. You may want to dispatch someone. So that's kind of how the flow sensor, the master valve, and the irrigation controller can all work together to really create a safe environment to reduce any type of catastrophe and water loss.
So right below that question, Justin, at 211 from Barbara, she asked, is a backflow preventer required at each irrigation water stub out from the main line?
No, not necessarily. So you need a backflow preventer in between the domestic water or the city water in your irrigation system. But there doesn't, so you have one backflow, basically that backflow protects your entire irrigation system. But let's just say you wanted to add irrigation to an area that doesn't currently have irrigation and there's no water there. And so you decided, well, we're going to hook up to the water spigot that comes out of, building 385. Well, you can't do that. You need a backflow at that point of connection. All right. So anytime where you're connecting into domestic water, into a house water or into city water, you need a backflow device. But once the water goes through that backflow device, you don't need any more backflows to the rest of the irrigation. So I hope I explained that well. It's hard without diagrams and stuff.
Right.
It's easier on site when we can point to stuff and explain stuff, but I'm doing my best here.
Okay. And what is, you might have just mentioned this, but what is the difference between a flow sensor and a pressure regulator?
Yeah, okay, perfect. So a flow sensor is gonna sense the flow, the amount of flow that is going through a line and tell you how much water is traveling, how many cubic feet of water. A pressure regulator is actually going to regulate the pressure at how much water is allowing to go through the line. So let's say your point of connection to your city water is 100 psi, which is really, really high. You may want to put a pressure regulator right before the backflow to knock that pressure down to say 45 or 50 psi, which will then allow your entire irrigation system to operate at that ideal 40 to 50 psi pressure. Because if you have 100 psi running through all your irrigation components, you have a higher chance of leak because there's simply more pressure on all of your irrigation components. So pressure regulator is going to regulate pressure. Flow sensor is going to sense flow.
Okay. We have John here who asked a question. What is your opinion on a two-stroke exhaust? I'm not sure what that is, so I hope you know.
Yeah. So actually, I didn't touch on this in the presentation, but there's been a lot of conversation about emissions, and we all hear the blowers, right? Man, the blowers in the morning, the two-stroke. Those are the two-stroke engines that are one of the most annoying sounds known to man. So for us, we've moved a lot of our blowers to electric blower simply because it is a better way to get the job done. It doesn't have emissions, it's quieter, and really it's almost an easier way of operating the blowers than to have this combustible engine that you're always having to add gas, and it's always running weird and not starting. So the battery power is, as long as you have battery, the unit's going to work. So what we've offered, the problem is they're much more expensive for a battery operated blower than it is for a 2-stroke operated blower. And typically this conversation always comes up with blowers rather than lawnmowers or anything else. So, depending on your HOA and what you guys want to do, you could decide that you guys would like to have battery operated blowers as part of your maintenance plan, your landscape management plan. So it's really a decision to be made by the board. It typically increases the cost a little bit more because the contractor has to invest in the new technology and charge the batteries every night and everything, but it will be a better image for sure because you're not polluting the air as much, and it also keeps the noise down by quite a bit. So for us, we are moving most of our fleet to battery operated. We're about 70% battery at this point. We're hoping to be 100% battery in the next couple of years. So it's just, technology is improving, and pretty soon I have a feeling that most of all of our equipment is going to be battery operated versus the current combustible engines that we're using today. Yeah, and keep an eye out for automated lawnmowers, smart lawnmowers that drive themselves. We've got a few teams we're working with in the Bay Area that have some pretty cool inventions. So you'll see those popping up here in the next couple of years too.
So this is towards the beginning of your presentation, Justin, but we had an attendee say we have about a dozen live oaks on our Carlsbad, California property. The above ground roots are a problem for the mowers who want them root pruned. However, they're concerned and want to suggest a larger tree ring area with a mulch instead. Is this appropriate for live oaks? Cutting the surface roots seems extreme.
Absolutely. Yeah. So oaks have 80% of the root system that they use for nutrients, water absorption, and others are within the top 12 inches of the soil. So if you ever see a construction site, you see that orange fencing around oak trees, that's to protect the root system, because too much compaction or cutting of the roots can really damage a live oak. So the best thing to do is in a live oak situation is to not touch any roots. And it's to extend, the perfect example of a good solution is to extend a big mulch ring under the oak and really keep the mowers and other equipment from being under that oak tree. One thing you want to make sure to do if you do that is to make sure you continue to provide irrigation, because that oak has gotten used to living in that nice, that nice turf grass irrigated area. So if you just put mulch there and you don't have added irrigation, that oak is going to have some major stress. So you want to make sure you add some irrigation to that area so it continues to live in the same environment. But I would definitely not recommend pruning oak tree roots. If it was a redwood tree, you could get away with a lot more, but oak trees are much more sensitive to that type of activities.
All right, so I think we've got time for one more question right here at the end from Darla. In your experience, are HOA landscapers typically able to comply with water district budget allocations?
I would say on average, no. I would say on average, your average landscaper is not going to be able to stay to a budget simply because they're focused on making sure the property looks great. So you're really going to need to work with them and help to create management plans and controller programming plans that keep you within that budget. It takes an active role of the board with most landscape companies to keep it within that budget. And really, as much as it comes down to having the right components, like the right sprinklers that are water use friendly, majority comes down to the programming of your controller. So you can water for 30 minutes every night and have a really green lawn. You can probably also water for 28 minutes every night and have a really green lawn. And then maybe you can water for 25 minutes every night and have a really green lawn. And so if you can cut 5 minutes from every single valve in your entire community and everything still looks great or pretty close to great, then that 5 minutes is about what are we talking? Maybe 15, 20%. So just by reducing every valve by 15 to 20%, you can usually get away with that without a negative effect to your landscape. And then you immediately have a 15 to 20% savings. So all your savings is hidden in the irrigation programming of your controller, which, speaking from experience, less than half of your landscape crews probably know how to properly program an irrigation controller. And that's why at K&D we do a lot of training. But even then, I'll admit today, we still have a number of our foremen who are not great at programming controllers. So we do a monthly audit of those controllers with our supervisor to make sure, even if it's a minute or two, we can program and give just the amount of water needed without giving a minute or two too many. Yeah, so that's the hidden savings there.
Thank you so much, Justin. And thank you everyone for all your questions and engagement. We truly appreciate it. Justin, you did a fantastic job today. I don't know if you saw in the chat, but everybody was giving you high praise. So great job.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it so much. And again, I write a weekly column in the Santa Cruz Sentinel. You can catch me there and anywhere else. Just keep a lookout. Thanks. Thanks, Karen.
Thank you.
Thank you,
And I do
Justin.
want to let everybody know about our first Saturday seminar. This is going to be very similar to our in-person half-day seminars, but it will not be in person. And you can go ahead and register for this on the events section of our website. And if you use promo code Saturday, you can get $5 off of your ticket price. So we encourage you to join us. We have a lot of great topics. It's going to be from 8 a.m. to 1:30. So be sure to register and use promo code Saturday. And again, thank you to everyone that is a member of ECHO. We greatly appreciate you, and anyone that is not a member, we encourage you to join us. And if you're interested, you can email jprice@echo-ca.org or call our office. And thank you everyone for joining us again. And just another reminder, this Saturday is part 2 for the HOA Community Management webinar series. That's this Saturday, part 2 at 9 a.m. So for those of you that registered, I'll see you on Saturday. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.